J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective who's been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Dateline, and Court TV. Now, we join him as he applies his investigative skills to making a case for Christianity.
What I want to do today is share with you some of my process. The only way I knew to determine if Christianity was true was to take the same approach I took with my cold cases. And the first pastor I ever sat in front of was a guy who said that Jesus was a really smart guy. And that was enough to get me to buy a Bible. And it was from there this whole thing started. Now, I want to start in a kind of funny, weird way, talking about the resurrection. I want to introduce you to a nightstand. This is a nightstand at a house where we were called a number of years ago to do a DBR. It's a dead body report. Somebody had died here, was dead in her bed. This was her nightstand. We knew this woman for years because she was a very committed drug addict. I actually had worked her as a bank robber. Now she's reportedly dead in her bed, and this is the nightstand that the officers saw sitting next to her bed. I'll get a little closer for you. You can see she's a heroin addict, so she's got her heroin needles here. She's cooking that heroin on that can. But she's also smoking rock cocaine to kind of balance out her day. That combination is not healthy. Now, since we had known her and taken her to jail for drug abuse for years, what do you think the officers thought this was going to be, even before they got there? Overdose. So they get there, and sure enough, she's dead in the bed, and this is her nightstand. So they said, okay, let's call the coroner's office. About an hour and 15 minutes, they're waiting around in the bedroom, shooting the breeze, waiting for a coroner's investigator to get there. The investigator finally gets there and pulls down the covers, and she's been stabbed to death. They didn't even bother to pull the covers down. First principle of investigations: do not have a presupposition that keeps you from investigating something. Don't think you know the answer before you even start investigating. Because if you think you know the answer to this, a good chance you're not going to get to the right point. You're going to miss something. See, what we're trying to do here is figure out what is the most reasonable inference from evidence, because that is the jury standard. By the way, we're not trying to prove things beyond a possible doubt. I could never prove anything. I've never had a case I could prove beyond a possible doubt. We have a jury instruction for this. We're aiming for reasonable doubt. That's a lower standard. That makes sense? Anything and everything is possible, but not everything is reasonable. There are philosophers, serious philosophers today, who believe we are in a universe that is nothing more than a computer simulation. That's possible. But is that reasonable? This is what we're after. Now, how do we determine if something is reasonable? That's the trick. How do you do that? Well, that's what I'm going to teach you this morning. But I have to show you something gruesome before I can start. I have to show you a dead body, okay? So we're going to do a little dead body work today. We're going to do a little death investigation 101, all right? Lucky for you, this dead guy looks suspiciously like my son Jimmy. Back when he used to work at Trader Joe's. Okay? So you can tell how old this presentation is. Now, when we find somebody's dead in a room, we're not quite sure we have a criminal case yet, because there are more than one way. There's 4 ways to die. Only one of those ways is criminal. We got to figure out which of these 4 ways this guy died. How we do that is we make a list of evidences and compare the evidences to the explanations in the room. How can we explain what we're seeing in the room? So far, the only evidence we have is a dead guy laying face down. How do you explain dead guys laying face down? Well, he might have died by some natural cause. He might have accidentally died. He might have killed himself. He might have been killed by somebody else. These are the 4 ways that people die. The question is, which of these ways is most reasonable? And I know people are taking photographs. I'm going to send you this whole video. You're going to get it today. I'm going to send it to you today by text. So just relax. Don't take any pictures, okay? This is a 17-hour course I teach at Biola. There's no way I could do the whole thing here. So I'm just going to send you all the material, okay? Does that sound good? All right. So what do I do so far? I got a dead guy laying. Can I cross out any of these possible explanations given the evidence in the room so far? Not really. I mean, if he had a heart attack, he would look like that. If he accidentally took too many pills, he would look like this. If he intentionally took too many pills, he would look like this. If I poisoned him with too many pills, he would look like this. So far, everything is not only possible, it's all equally reasonable. Let's change our scenario. What if he's a dead guy laying face down, but he's in a pool of his own blood center torso? That would change things. Let's add that to our list. Can I cross out something now? What can I cross out? Yeah, I mean, look, is there some rare medical condition in which you could bleed from no opening in your center torso? Possible, but I'm not after possible. I'm after reasonable. I can cross that one out. But until I roll him over, I can't cross out anything else. Let's change our scenario. What if he's a dead guy who's laying face down in a pool of his own blood, and now he's got a big honking knife sticking out of his back? Okay, why are you laughing at the knife in the back part? I don't know. By the way, this is my resurrection talk for Easter Sunday. At churches, which is like a weird kind of a talk, right? Okay, so now we have to add this piece of evidence. Can I cross out something here? I think I can at least cross out. I mean, I don't know how you could accidentally get me. It's possible, but I'm going to go ahead and cross that accidental. But it is low enough that I could do this to myself. And we see a lot of crazy suicides because a lot of the suicides we investigate are drug-induced suicides. So I'm going to leave that last one in for now. Let's change the scenario, though. What if he's a dead guy laying face down in a pool of his own blood with multiple stab wounds, upper back? This changes things. And now I think we have to kind of at least, I think I can cross out suicide, unless you're just incredibly gifted, flexible, and have a high tolerance for pain. But for sure, if there was bloody footprints leading out of the room, you would know there's no way to explain that. So if I added that additional element, now we have a good reason to believe that this is a homicide. Are we all on the same page here so far? What we basically did was we compared the explanations to the evidences in the room. By the way, Jimmy is still alive, okay? He went to UCLA. I went to UCLA. We are both Bruins, okay? My son David is a doctor. He went to USC. He's a communist, okay, just so you know. That's the difference, basically, between those two things. Now, this process that we just talked about is a process known as abductive reasoning, and I drew it in the book so you can see it. This is from Cold-Case Christianity. This process is a very common skill that detectives use, and we also asked jurors to employ this same process in jury deliberation. Now, why does this matter? Because when I was first looking at the case for Christianity, I knew that there was one piece of evidence that was more important than any other piece of evidence, according to Paul at least. It's this idea of the resurrection. If we have not been telling you the truth about the resurrection, you not only have no hope of your own resurrection, but we have been lying to you. And if that's the case, why would I trust you for anything? This was the most important, to me, thing to investigate. Why couldn't we use abductive reasoning for this? Why couldn't we list the evidences in the room and then the explanations for the evidence and determine which is the most reasonable? Now, what would count as an evidence in the room? I would have told you as an atheist, and I was the very, very committed atheist. I was the kind of atheist who read. Before the new atheist, I would read a lot, and I would push back against the people who were Christians in my life because they were lame Christians. The officers I knew could not tell you why I should trust the Bible. They had no more reason for me to trust the Bible than someone could trust the Book of Mormon. They couldn't give me 4 reasons why I should trust the Bible. And the other group I met who were Christians were the people we were taking to jail, because a lot of those folks would tell us they were Christians. So both of those groups were unappealing to me. But I did believe some things about the resurrection as an atheist, and that was the minimal place you could get me to start. I would have said, yeah, I believe that Jesus was crucified. I'm not a Jesus myther, okay? There are a lot of those out there right now. But I mean, I think that the evidence is, why would you think that Jesus never even lived? There's not any good reason to believe that. But so what? Okay, so he lived, he's crucified, he's buried. That happens every day in some place in the world today. Someone will probably be crucified for their faith in Christ. This does not make Christianity true. That could be true, yet Christianity still be false. The fact that Jesus lived and died on a cross and was buried does not make Christianity true. Now, people, there was an empty tomb. Because clearly, if you wanted to end this in the first century, here's how you do it. You get the body of Jesus, you drag it around town. That's game over. Or you get the initial alleged eyewitnesses to recant. That would also be game over. Those things didn't happen, but this does not make it true. These 2 things could be true, yet Christianity could still be false. I believe those 2 things were true, yet I believe Christianity was false. Third thing, these folks said they saw the risen Christ. So? A lot of people, you work this job long enough, you're going to find out that people say all kinds of stupid, crazy things. Does not make them true. And finally, they did seem to be committed to this lie, or to this fabrication, or to this illusion, whatever it was. All four of these things could be true, yet Christianity could still be false. This is where I stood as a non-Christian. I'll give you those four things. Now, I have to explain them, though. And I would have offered one of 6 ways to explain these as an atheist. I will list them here for you. The 7th is your way on the bottom. Now, we're not going to be able to talk about all these today. We're going to go fast as we can through a couple of them. And I'll send you the rest in the video, okay? It's possible that they were just mistaken about his death. If he didn't really die on the cross, he just passed out or he was just unconscious, then we have a resuscitation, but not necessarily a resurrection. So how would we know if he's really dead or not? That's something we do for a living, right? There are people in this room that I've been talking to who both work homicides. We know what death looks like, but I'll bet most of you don't know what death looks like. And it's pretty clear that John did not really understand what the biological evidence for death was. He might have recognized it by touching it. But you'll see this in the Gospel of John. He writes this passage. And in this passage, he's describing what happened to Jesus and the 2 thieves. You know, they came around. The 2 thieves were not yet dead, so they broke their legs. Well, they should have broken Jesus' legs too, because if 2 of the 3 are not dead, why would you think the 3rd one is dead? And you don't break his legs to make sure he's dead. So he's not really dead. He's just unconscious. That's the claim. So they stabbed him with the spear, piercing his side. And out of his side came this interesting sudden flow of blood and water. Not just watery blood. He's saying he saw blood and water. That was confusing. I think it confused John. It certainly confused the first readers of this passage for 500 years. Because as you read the church fathers, whenever they describe John 19, they say it's not water. It couldn't be water. It makes no sense to be water. It's got to be something else, it's like a metaphor. It's like a symbol of their baptism or a symbol of the Holy Spirit. It couldn't be water. John just used that term. It wasn't really water. And I don't care who you read on this passage, they reject the idea that it was water. But they don't understand the biology of death. If you've ever been to a car accident and someone dies right in front of you, or you do an assault and you get there and it turns into a homicide because they die right in front of you, you will see that as the heart begins to shut down, people enter into what's called circulatory shock. And you will start to shut down, your organs will start to shut down. And if you have a cardiac arrest where your heart stops, you'll suffer one of 2 forms of effusion. The first one's called pericardial effusion. If you've ever been to an autopsy, you'll see this is where water kind of is in the sac around your heart. But to be honest with you, it's not quite as large as it appears here. And if you go to you could stab that area, it won't look like water and blood. It'll look like blood because the heart is a rich source of blood. But if you happen to be in the right position when you die, especially if you're upright, you will suffer what's called pleural effusion, and that is where water actually accumulates in your lung. And if you stab that chest cavity, you'll see a separation of water and blood. But that means you've already suffered cardiac arrest. There's actually hidden science in the Gospel of John that demonstrates that Jesus is dead. And nobody knew it in the first 500 years of the church because biological sciences had not yet caught up with the author named John. Now, a lot of you have never touched a dead body. Some of you have. That's your job for some macabre reason. You actually handle dead people. Raise your hand if you've had the great fortune of handling a dead person. Raise your hand. Okay. So you already know that dead people do not look like unconscious actors in movies. They don't. You can tell a dead person from across the room. Why? Because something called the mortis triad. I want to teach it to you. I'm going to take you to Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. It's on North Mission Road off the 5 freeway. Are you in Los Angeles County? So you've been here before. So this is the main office where you meet with the coroners. Next door is the examination room. If you walk up these steps right here, it's pretty cool. You walk up these steps, you go in that door. This window over here to the right, I'm sure it's still there. That is the Los Angeles County Coroner's gift shop. It's called Skeletons in the Closet. I have a bunch of stuff from this place. You can get shirts like this one that says, "Our bodies of work speak for themselves." You can get a mouse pad that says, "We're dying for your business." Yeah, it's pretty macabre, right? Next door, there's a big white building, and in the basement of that white building are the examination rooms. Now look, if you're a homicide detective assigned a homicide in Los Angeles County, you have to be present for the autopsy of the victim because the coroner is not going to testify at the prelim. You're going to testify at the prelim for the coroner, therefore you have to see whatever he sees. So we get to go to a lot of autopsies. And I just have one suit that I use for autopsies because it's nasty. Because when I started in 1988, this was not a metal table. This was a wood table. Yeah, that's right. There's a reason why it's got grooves as a metal table, why there's an actual grate down here, because you can wash all the blood off these tables. And at 50 to 60 autopsies a day in this room, this is a nasty, bloody, stinky room. It smells so bad, I can't even tell you. And there's actually a sign on the wall behind this thing over here. I'm sure it's still there. It says, "No eating in the examination room." Like someone's going to eat in here, okay? But something inconvenient happens when your heart stops pushing warm blood. You start to show the obvious signs of death. Why am I teaching this? Because look, you may not get it in the 21st century because you don't handle dead people. You hire somebody like a mortuary comes and picks up your grandmother, or the autopsy is done by a coroner's investigator who gets there. But in the first century, there were no autopsies. There were no coroner's offices. There were no mortuaries. Everyone handled their own dead. You don't know the mortis triad, but don't tell me they didn't know it. You think they missed this? The first thing that happens is you start to cool down. No hot blood coursing through your veins. You will be cooler to the touch. You're not going to notice this when handling the body of Jesus? It's possible. I don't think it's reasonable, though. That is called algor mortis. Also, when I take you off that cross, you're not just going to flop back down. You're going to be stiff because you begin to stiffen up after you die. That's called a rigor mortis. You notice it. Your skin is even less. As an old guy, I hate the fact that when I pinch the skin on the back of my hand, it doesn't snap back like it used to, right? Well, when you're dead, it snaps back even worse, okay? It's called rigor mortis. But the big giveaway is that when you die and your heart stops pushing blood, gravity begins to draw blood. And that means if you die on your back and I roll you over, you'll be discolored on your back. You'll start to swell at the lowest points where blood is no longer moving back to your heart. It's just starting to settle because of gravity. If you die in an upright position, your feet will turn purple and they will swell. That is called liver mortis. This is the mortis triad. Hey, it's possible that these first century experts in death missed it. I think it's just because we don't understand it that we think they would miss it. Trust me, they're not going to miss it. It's not reasonable. But hey, maybe they're just lying about this. Some of you in this room, I know, you like conspiracy theories. Those are stupid, okay? If you think you know of a successful conspiracy, you don't, because it's not successful by definition if you know about it, right? It turns out, if they're lying about this, there are 5 things that are necessary to complete a criminal conspiracy. We know how about this. We have to use these 5 things to break conspiracies. I'm going to teach it to you. These are the 5 things you have to be successful in a conspiracy. 1, you want the smallest number of co-conspirators. Not rocket science, right? 2 people can keep a secret longer and better than 22 people. 2, you want it for the shortest possible amount of time. The best conspiracies are where 2 people commit a crime together, then one kills the other. Awesome conspiracy. Only 2 were involved and now it's over. 3, you have to have excellent communication between co-conspirators, because we're going to jam you up and start asking questions. We're going to separate you, right? First thing we're going to do is separate you. Why are we doing that? Because we know unless you can communicate, you will not have all the same details perfectly memorized. So you need good communication. I just talked to the detective and I told him this. So you can repeat it to me. Of course, I'm going to get in the weeds when I do the interview, so there's no way you're going to have covered that stuff in advance. 4, if you've got a close familial relationship with somebody, there's a better chance you're going to protect that person than if you don't. And 5, if you can avoid pressure, this can go on forever. If no one's asking questions, no one's going to catch it. These are the 5 things that are needed to successfully complete a conspiracy. If you're telling me that the Christian disciples were lying about the resurrection, then they have to have these 5 things. And if you ask me, already it's too big a group. It's not just James and Peter and John. It's not just the 12. How many do we have in the upper room? They're picking a replacement for Judas. And from people who had seen the Christ, seen Jesus from the baptism to the resurrection. And what does Paul tell us? And the oldest creed in all of Christendom is in 1 Corinthians 15:3. Right? For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scripture, that he was buried and raised on the 3rd day according to the Scriptures, that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brethren at one time, most of whom remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. 500? That's right. So how big is this group? Too big. That's the problem. Let's play a game of Clue together. Okay, old school Clue. This is the old school Clue board. So our game is going to be a little bit different. We'll take the area around where Jesus did his ministry. Our game pieces will be the disciples. The first part of this game is how long do these, there's already too many, by the way. This group is already too large. It's not 12. It's over 500 people. It's too large. I'm already out. But if they only have to hold it for a minute, they could probably do it. But it's not a minute or 6 minutes or 6 hours or 6 days or 6 months or 6 years or it's 6 decades. You want me to believe that this group of over 500 people kept this without anyone ever breaking or recanting for 60 years? No, that to me doesn't seem reasonable. It's possible. And by the way, the next thing is going to be communication. Are they able to talk to it and like line up their stories? Okay, they're not in this holy huddle. They're all over the game board. So this dude over here, Thomas, has no way to communicate with Matthew. And by the way, as they're snapping fingers off of Thomas, they're telling him already, hey, Matthew's already told us the whole story. Confess to it, confess to it. He's not confessing to it. He's not changing his story. Hey, Paul's already drinking margaritas over here, okay? Come on, tell us the truth. He's not changing his story. And no way to communicate. They can't Snapchat each other. They can't text each other. How do they tell in real time what the other person is saying? That's a problem. They're separated by too many miles. Now, are they undergoing any pressure? Have you ever watched Jack Bauer in the original 24? Okay, that dude, if he was doing an interview and he needed to get to the truth, what would he do? Whatever it takes to get to the truth. No rules. That's what's happening to these guys. They're being tortured for their testimony. Just get one to recant, it's game over. No one's budging on their testimony. Of course, the next question is, are there any brothers? Yeah, there are brothers. You got, Peter and Andrew. You got James and John. But over here, you got a guy who is not even related to the ministry of John the Baptist. You got a guy who was not part of that in crowd. That group of people who was hanging out with John the Baptist, who were looking and waiting for the Messiah. So when John saw him, he could say, hey, there's the Messiah. There's the Lamb of God. And they all go over and become Jesus' disciples. This dude is not one of them. This dude is somebody nobody likes. He's the one non-disciple outside watching all of it named Levi, who comes into the group late with no friendship to anybody in the group. They didn't want to be at his house that night for dinner. Yet after watching this nonsense for 3 years, he is now in the group. And he writes one of the earliest Gospels and never flinches. That's interesting to me. And finally, I just think this is way too easy. Given the 5 things that we typically use to break a conspiracy, this would have been easy to break. Now, is it possible it's conspiracy? Yeah, anything is possible. If you always ask me, is it possible? I will always say yes, but it's not reasonable. The last explanation is your explanation as a Christian, that these authors are simply accurately reporting what really happened in history. I'll tell you, every explanation you've ever offered for any set of phenomena has strengths and weaknesses. I know in all my criminal trials that my explanation for the events is strong. But I also know where my case's weaknesses are. I know that it has weaknesses. I know I have to protect the jury from getting those weaknesses under their skin, right? Because every case has both strengths and weaknesses. Your explanation has strengths. As a matter of fact, I think that your Christian explanation explains those first 4 things we talked about better than any other explanation. But your explanation has a weakness that for me as an atheist was a deal killer. And here it is. You want me to believe that the best inference from evidence is a miracle. That Jesus rose from the grave supernaturally. No. That's stupid. I was a very committed philosophical naturalist. You're not going to convince me the best and most reasonable inference from evidence is something supernatural. But stop for a second. What are we really investigating this morning? We're investigating this central claim. Are supernatural events could they ever be the most reasonable inference from it? That's the thing we're investigating. I can say, no, don't believe in the supernatural. No, stupid. That's the thing we're investigating. Put your prior presupposition on the shelf for a minute. That's the very question we're asking. Don't have the answer yet. We're going to investigate that. Because if you don't do that, I can show you evidence. I do entire talks where I just talk about how early these documents are. You'll find a way to jump over that because you don't believe in the supernatural. I can show you ways in which it's quoted by the earliest students of the eyewitness. You'll find a way to jump over that. I can show you archaeological support. You'll find a way to jump over that. And no matter what I show you, you will find a way to jump over. Why? Because you are committed to this end. And why are you committed to that end? Because that's where you started, and you refuse to move. Are you being fair to the investigation, really? Because you'll always end up there. You'll never end up anywhere else if you're not willing to move. Look, there's a reason why I showed you this nightstand. These officers had the conclusion in their mind before they got there, so that when they got there, they didn't even pull down the covers. They thought they knew the answer. You will miss something if you start that way. So when it comes right down to it in resurrection, you got one of two options. This is it. Jesus either rose from the grave or he didn't. Those are the two options. Now, if you said to me, as a skeptic, Jim, I want you to keep your mind open and consider all explanations, including supernatural ones, I would have said, no, can't do that. I don't believe in the supernatural. That's a roadblock that keeps me from getting here. I could never get here because this is sitting in my way. The problem is, if you look at all the natural explanations, they don't work. I've tried to make them. By the way, Bart Ehrman just added, the skeptic from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, he just added the one that they were influenced, the number 5 in the background there. He just added that last year. Why do people continue to add theories? Because they know the theories don't work. So they jump to a new theory. So I knew these didn't work. But I would find a way to dig around those, go around those, jump over those, because I wanted to get over here. I ignored all these problems. Now just take a look at this path for a second. Which of these two forks in the road is least encumbered? Duh, right? And it turns out the only thing in the path on this side, I put there. I'm in control of that one. I could actually pull it down. Oh, no, I would never do that. No, I don't believe in the supernatural. No, wait a minute. I can't control how bad these things are. I don't make these up. This is just what they are. But over here, there's only one roadblock of my creation. If I'm just willing to lay it down, this is by far the most reasonable inference from evidence. The only thing that ever kept me from seeing that was me. And once I realized that, it changed the way I thought about it.
To hear more from J. Warner Wallace, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For more information on this week's topic, visit youtube.com/coldcasechristianity with J. Warner Wallace. Thank you for joining us on this Cold Case Christianity broadcast.